Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns market report for today, October 15th, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about, and we do, so let's get started with that. Yes, so FYI, before we even get started, yes, I've been able to score rush tickets for next summer. Very excited. Did not decide on spending way too much money on the meet and greet package, even though everybody is like behind the scenes is like, dude, come on, like do it. I'm like, well, maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll score one when I'm in Fort Worth. But as of right now, the much more reasonable and responsible thing to do is to just spend slightly too much money on, taking my family to what should be a freaking great show and a very cool experience. And we can send the boys off hopefully into, a second retirement with all the goodwill that they deserve. Let's hope it's good. So with that said, what's funny this morning, so Georgia Meloni is here in the United States, and and she's apparently here to negotiate an individual trade deal with Trump, which I find hilarious, which we all knew was coming. But the timing on this is really interesting because behind the scenes, I'm hearing multiple reports of France is now seriously considering dissolving the Fifth Republic, which is their current constitution. This is now, who would believe that they would actually do this, right? Given, Davos's apparent control over France, upper management, the high table, is never going to allow that to happen. But the French political scene is such a mess that France could literally be the first country to fall in the European Union. I've been saying forever, and I know I took a lot of heat for this, a couple of years ago, but I always said that I thought Georgia Meloni was just doing her very best just to stay alive, right? If she could just figure out how to stay alive, she would, again, it's kind of, how do you win? You win by outlasting your opponent, right? You don't win by always, doing the, perfect pantomime of an oppositional, someone with oppositional defiance disorder. I find so much of our commentary really does come down to that. It's a kind of childish, well, no, she's the populist. Now she has to go out there and be our champion and commit political suicide to stay philosophically strong. I'm like, really? Okay. Or how about she survives? And she stands in place, and just kind of holds the door open and holds the line while everybody else like loses their mind around her. Like, you haven't learned that that's like the most viable strategy for dealing with people who have an unbelievable amount of power? That the best thing you can do is just, survive? That if you can just survive the onslaught, they're going to eventually burn themselves out? And, I don't know how many times I have to make that point. And I'm not saying that I'm getting a lot of that now, but there's still a few very vocal members of the community who just don't seem to understand this, or don't want to understand it, or being willfully obtuse, or whatever they are, whatever their motivation is. And I think I've communicated it very clearly. And I think Maloney's record speaks for itself. She has not gone lockstep in with Ukraine, with the escalation in Ukraine. Anytime she appears to do so, the Italians wind up sending over, a bunch of crap that they just, pulled out of their warehouse and sent it over there. I mean, literally talking about like sending over like half tracks that don't run, or, tanks that have no treads, and, weapon systems that don't fire. Like, here you go. Here's some crap that we pulled out of storage that doesn't work. We haven't looked at in 30 years, but you can have it. Like, that's not help. That's actually a hindrance, because those systems have to be rehabilitated. That takes time. That takes money that Ukraine clearly doesn't have. It means that France has to foot the bill for the refit, or Germany or somebody else has to fit the bill for the refit. Meanwhile, the Italians, clear out a whole bunch of, storage space that they don't have to like melt the shit down or whatever they're going to do with it. It's like, okay, cool. Like, it's like having a yard sale. It's like the Italians have been holding, military estate sales for Ukraine to come over and pick over, like it's what's going on. And I think it's brilliant what Meloni has done. She's got sincere, like, opposition within Italian parliament and Italian government still. Matteo Renzi is still lurking around trying to coordinate and garner power. PD, which the Democrats, the nominally Renzi's party, is still the biggest opposition party she's got. It still holds 22% of the electorate according to current polling. So it's still the second most popular party in Italy, and it's a problem. If PD were to collapse into the teens, or certainly into the mid-teens, to be no different than, say, M5S or Forza Italia or Lega or anybody else, like, that would be a different story. But it's not. Okay, it's a real problem for her, and so we have to watch this continue to play itself out. Mattarella hasn't abdicated. He's like 85 years old. He probably, he eats paste and probably can't even change his own adult diapers anymore, but doesn't matter. He's in charge. He's still in place. So we contrast that with what's happening in France. And if these reports that I'm hearing about the collapse of the Fifth Republic and the demands for basically a new constitution or a new, constitutional framework in France, that's a big deal. And that is going to cost Macron everything. Or is it, right? I don't know enough here to speculate much further. But what I will say is that we can view this from one of two perspectives, right? We can view it as, oh my God, the French are about to collapse, and Marine Le Pen and the populists and some coalition is going to come together and write a new constitution, throw Macron in jail, the whole 9 yards, and that there's going to be a military takeover in France, because that's the way this would happen. And then they would put somebody, then they would, hold elections, hold a constitutional referendum, yada, 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 do what needs to be done, get it ratified, and move a new government. And hell, that'll take 6 to 9 months, right? But, or this is what Davos wants, in that they want to collapse the French government. By doing that, they also collapse the German government is next. They're clearly in the process of collapsing the British government, among others, so that they can move to political integration in Brussels, right? If all the major states of the EU, turn into political basket cases, then they can make the argument that we need to do away with individual sovereignty, clearly, and that the EU is, more important, and that, European solidarity against the evil Putler is what we need to go for at this point. I don't know that they're going to be able to pull that off, but I can see both forces trying to use political turmoil in France for their ends. I don't know how it's going to work itself out. Into this mix, of course, is Trump trying to cleave Italy away from the rest of Europe. Now, I've been making this call for years, that saying that this is where Italy wants to go. That the sovereigntist wing, even during the Biden junta, the sovereigntist wing of the American establishment that was clearly working in the shadows. Right, that's my Wall Street plus U.S. military and even intelligence loyalist argument, that they were out there, gumming up the works and monkey wrenching all of the Obama, Biden junta, whatever you want to call it, whatever their plans were, and that Italy was their primary base of operations. Again, why? Because the American military has more bases in Italy than it has anywhere else in the world, and so. It's the perfect staging area for the Americans to come in and support a breakaway government from the European Union. So if somebody's, sitting there at, I don't know, Third Revolution Central, right? We have Evil Corp Central, and then we have, Third Revolution Central. If they're sitting there going, game planning this out, wargaming this out, it's like, how do we get Italy out of here? How do we get Italy out of this mess? Well, how do we break the EU? Well, you could make the argument, looking around the table right now, that they're winning. Again, I'm not saying they are winning. I'm saying that you could make the argument that they're winning and that it's incumbent upon us to view events from a particular perspective. But we know what their strategy is. We can see it. It's as clear as day. And we can see what Davos' strategy is. It's clear as day. And then the question is, who's going to win? And interestingly enough, France becomes the fulcrum. And now Trump is screaming that Spain isn't acting very nice, and now he wants to put individual tariffs on Spain. Again, to remind everybody that he doesn't even believe that the European Union is a thing. That he only wants to negotiate individual trade deals with individual countries. And so everybody who supported him in the Middle East, everybody who betrayed themselves to try and stop the Middle East peace process by recognizing the state of Palestine, that was their plan, is on Trump's bad side right now. And clearly Trump is in control of the operational tempo here. The things are not happening outside of Trump's operational tempo. Trump is setting the operational tempo on everything. Everything. And I find that, I find it fascinating. I don't, but again, he's in a position like Putin what used to be in. I think about this now, and I haven't made this argument in a long time because it hadn't popped into my head. But Trump is in a position in the United States that was very similar to Putin's when I first started looking at Putin. I'm looking at Putin and going, he's trying to stand up to the global hegemon, which at the time I thought was, the United States plus Europe. And I probably was correct about that. More the United States than Europe, the evil empire, Pepe Escobar kind of empire of chaos bullshit. But I kept thinking about that going, in order for Putin to survive this, in order for Russia to win in its future as some kind of sovereign state, Putin can't afford to make any real strategic errors. I always thought that. I used to argue from that perspective. We used to do the live streams. We used to argue from that perspective, going back into the 2017, 2018. Used to argue these things all the time, saying Putin can't afford to make a big mistake, folks, even though he did make some big mistakes. Trusting Angela Merkel was one of them. But the basic framework of the analysis was to always cast Putin as a guy who has to be so good and fight wars on every front and anticipate where they're going to come at him next. Because if he lets anything go, he's going to lose. Because once they get you in one area, they'll be able to, start breaking you down in other areas. The same type of analysis actually goes for Trump. He's in the same boat that Putin was in. And, he's chosen to take on this war. He's chosen to fight this war far more aggressively than Putin did with Russia. Putin really did just rope-a-dope everybody. Trump is not rope-a-doping at all. Trump is like, fuck that. We got the best military in the world. We got the biggest financial markets. We have power. We're going to use it. We're the United States. Here's my fucking cock. Here's my big fat golden cock. And now I'm going to whack you over the head with it. And yeah, it's made of gold. And he should act that way. We are the United States. Hate to break it to everybody, but everyone who said that the United States was on the verge of financial collapse is proving to be really wrong. I've got the TIC reports receipts for this month, folks. You're going to fucking scream at how hilarious they are. We'll get to that in a few minutes. So, whether Trump wins every battle or not is up in the air. But this was something that Dexter and I talked about a lot in the early days of the administration earlier in the year. He's like, dude, he has to keep the operational tempo. If he slows down at all, they're going to overwhelm him. He's going to get eaten alive. He has to be very careful here. This was Dexter's, this is, and Dexter's really good at this stuff. He tends to, in my personal opinion, he tends to, because he's so good at seeing the game board. He's so good at seeing the future that sometimes he outthinks himself and can only think in terms of weaknesses and threats and forgets strengths and opportunities, right? The whole SWOT analysis. And this is, so he immediately goes there. And so what I do naturally is to take the opposite position, not to be defiant, but to bring balance to the equation, to the situation. So he says, all of these things are threats. If Trump loses this battle here, he's going to get overwhelmed. I'm like, yes, or he has to allow them to win one or two in order to get them to think that they can still win, so that he can then turn that win against them later, because you can see how this could be turned against them later. I don't remember the exact things we're talking about, but and then we get to find out, I think maybe I know the height of this was like Signal Gate, right? When they were going after the cabinet over Signal. I remember having a couple of really contentious, conversations, over what was happening at that point in time. And I think I kept just trying to reframe for him, it's not, he's like, dude, it's not like I disagree with you, but we can also see it like this, and this. There may be something else going on, and we should watch to see how it plays out. For example, and I think I said, look, if they don't actually get any cabinet members out of this fucking thing, then this is a win. And they expended an awful lot of political capital and an awful lot of, assets to push this thing on the table. They burned their asset, be it MI6 or the CIA or the U.S. intelligence community or the Mossad or all of the above. They all burned a very big asset, which was being up on all of the cabinets, phones that they have to use when they're not in the office together. They burned that asset, and they got nothing for it other than, a week's worth of flare up. And it didn't go anywhere, and they didn't get Hegseth, and they didn't get Gabbard, and they didn't get anyone else. And you can even make the argument that they went out of their way to get rid of Pam Bondi as AG, and people were still like being stupid, thinking that the Epstein files, again, weren't a trap designed from the ground up to get the AG and Kash Patel out of the FBI so that they can continue to control that, win that, and get a political win there, and then use that by which to then start breaking down Trump's support in Congress with a very thin majority. I'm using my air quotes. You guys can't see it. My scare quotes, and then break him down. That was the goal of the Epstein kerfuffle, and it's failed. And they keep trying to resurrect it because it got some traction within the community, and they allowed the Lawberts to keep running their fucking mouths about it, and they keep activating their cuck boy, fucking Thomas Massey, and it's hilarious. And the libertarians keep this guy alive. I'm telling you, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. The more I come out against Massey, the more people that actually have met him and know Kentucky politics are like, that guy's he's a fucking clown show. Nobody actually even likes him. They don't like him on Capitol Hill. They don't like him in Kentucky. The only people who like him are the fucking Mises crowd. Those astute political philosophers who have built so much in their life. Okay. Not that I'm bitter or anything. Me? Bitter? Never. So, we're in a very interesting moment in time, folks. And, there's so many other things happening. I could talk about a variety of things, but I think these two things here are the most important. What's going on in France, we need to watch carefully. What's going on with Meloni and Italy and Trump, also very interesting. Clearly, this is downstream of the Middle East peace deal, which is fucked. Britain, France, the EU, the high table. Now I see reports of Iranian oil tankers are lighting up their GPS transponders all over the freaking world to let everybody know where their ships are while they're still under sanction. What does that mean? Is it true? I guess I've heard it from a couple of different places, but again, does it all trace back to one source? I don't know. I don't have the bandwidth to like check to track that down. But if we're seeing it in real time, where we get first order, first hand account of all the GPS ship data, what does that say? Clearly, in order to get everybody to sign off on this deal, Iran had to get something, right? How do you get a deal like this to go through? Everyone has to get something, except for the people who created this fucking nightmare in the first place. They got nothing. They lost. The Brits got nothing. Tony Blair's not going to be involved in the rebuilding of Gaza, even though they tried to insert his fucking evil ass into it. Not going to happen. And if it does, and if he is there, he will be so neutered, it will not matter. He will be nothing more than a fly on the wall to report back to Evil Corp Central, and everybody will know it, and nobody will feed him anything. I heard something else the other day that really, I have to salt all this shit to taste. But if the Israelis, on the eve of the deal, I heard from, it was one of the British alternative news press. I was news sources, and I saw an Instagram video of it. I think I tweeted it out with big if true, that the Israelis sent the 2-word message to GCHQ, which said game over. And then they signed the peace deal. And then they shut off all intelligence sharing between Israel and MI6. And Rubio let it be known the other day, that the United States State Department has basically shut down intelligence sharing with MI6. This shit's over, folks. We're winning. So it's happening across every front. And so, but at the same time, of course, because it's happening across every front, that means that we should see more acceleration. And when I was asked on a podcast the other day, why are things accelerating? When I was on with Andy Millett the other day, and he, opens with so why are things accelerating? And why? That's because Trump went to meet with the king, which of course was not the answer he was expecting. And again, I don't know what the actual outcome of this is, of that meeting was. My base case is that Trump went with terms of surrender and the king said no. But, you could still make the argument that the king is a captured pawn. And that, he doesn't really have any say in the matter. It could have been that Trump went over there to tell the king, your part to play when the time is right is to dissolve Parliament when I tell you to. And your job now is to set the stage for it, because this is what's coming. And that will be your final act as king. And then you will abdicate, and then you will hand the crown over to William. And we will move forward. We could have, all of these things could be on the table in the next 6 months. So maybe the next 6 weeks. I mean, Marty's out there screaming at Socrates is saying, hey, week of the 27th, folks, anything's possible. Again, you just take all the information in and you just kind of like put it up on the board and, do the whiteboard thing. And the way I used to do it when I, was a research chemist, I had an 8x4 whiteboard up on my, in my office. Literally, I ordered an 8x4 whiteboard, and my boss at the time was like, what are you ordering? I'm like, I need an 8x4 whiteboard for my office so I can work shit out visually in real time. He's like, oh, absolutely. He's like, I can't say yes to this fast enough. And at that point with me and me and dry erase markers for the next 3 years was, and the insanity that I used to write up on that board. But it was fun. It was a good time. And I still do it today. I just do it metaphorically. I don't have a whiteboard in my office or anywhere else that I'm running around. So we're at that moment in time, folks, where we are, we're having to put everything up on the board and see how it sticks to each other, and then how it relates to each other, and ask good questions about why these things are happening. And the more we do that, the better our resolution will get. I think I'm getting better at this, and I hope I'm getting better at it every day, because it's the only way we're going to get through this, is to keep our, keep the ego in check, keep all of it in check, and go, now what? What they fucking do yesterday? Oh, Jesus Christ, now what? And but the way you beat them is you force them to put their money on the table. And so that's what we're going to be. That's what I'm focused on now. Is clearly Trump and company are going after various aspects of the trade. The private money, as E.M. Burlingame likes to put it. Now we have to get their money onto the table. We got to get it trapped. We got to get them to think that they still have a chance to win, and that's why they will put more money on the table. If we can get them to do that, then eventually they will run out of capital. And we'll just take all the gold and we'll distribute it amongst the people, either tokenized or otherwise, and we'll move forward with our lives. And I mean gold in a metaphoric sense, but in a practical sense, gold is $4,200 an ounce. I really don't want it to move $200 a week here. I want it to move 100 or 150 at most. I want it to try and keep some kind of a rational channel. Otherwise, it's going to start, as what it's doing now, is it's starting, right? Let me make sure that I've got starting to get parabolic. Silver has gone parabolic, right? But there's also no supply in silver. Silver could easily continue to rise here another $20, $30 an ounce because there's no physical supply, because we're still $1.50 into backwardation, meaning at $1.70 divided by 20, that's 8 months worth of backwardation. 8 months. The gold market is acting normally, and we're seeing these kinds of price moves. This just reminds you of those days when Jim Sinclair used to say to us, there's going to come a time when gold starts moving $100 or $200 a day. It's going to happen. I remember Jim saying it as clear as day. I remember listening to him 1,000 times. I remember talking to him about it the few times that I had the privilege to meet him, or I emailed with him. And I do mean it sincerely when I say that I do have the kind of social anxiety that precludes me from going out and bothering other people who I don't know. It's very, very difficult. I don't like intruding on other people's lives. I don't. That was part of the conversation I had yesterday with Adam Curry for the podcast, which I'll try and get out either today or tomorrow, probably tomorrow. I really got to get the newsletter finished. This is what's happening in gold. This is systemic. It's systemic. I mean, when Jamie Dimon is coming out and going, look, gold can go to $5,000, $10,000 an ounce. I mean, that's what Jamie Dimon is talking about. We at JP Morgan are going to, invest, $100 trillion or $1 trillion in $100 billion to $1 trillion in actual infrastructure, not the bullshit financialization of real estate like they were doing previously during the previous round, but real, honest to God, industrial lending. That's a sea change, folks. Nothing. I mean, that's a fundamental move orthogonally. We've moved 90 degrees out of phase with where we were. It's a new world if they're serious about this. And the timing of Dimon coming out and saying these things at this moment in time, incredibly important. It's purely straight up him speaking for Wall Street. This is the direction we're going. We're going forward. And then that old business model is over. We want to do net interest margin, infrastructure, development banking, development lending, and not casino lending. It portends, now that I think about it, it portends that we're going to get a major overhaul of banking regulations in this country to end the casino. Because we no longer have to have the casino in order to be competitive with the casino in London. Because we're going to break fucking London. That's what that it implies that. Whether they're going to be successful or not, or is, again, is up in the air, but that's what it implies. That's what their thinking is. That's where they're going. That's where that's where they want to put the puck. That's the breakout they're setting up out of their zone. How they're going to move through the neutral zone, how they're going to attack the net. Whether the defense forms up on the fucking blue line and stops it, whether they fumble the puck at the blue line or not is a different story. Okay? You can't argue with the intention. You can't argue with the breakout. You can argue with the execution. And you can't use failed execution as a way of saying, oh, well, they were never really on our side in the first place. No, that's just fucking giving up and chuckling and collapsitarian because you don't have any fucking thing to say. And as I said at the end of the podcast I did with Vince the other day, if you don't have anything to say, shut your fucking pie hole. If that's all you have to add to the conversation, you're not adding anything to the conversation. Add signal, not noise. You're either going to be a warrior or you're going to be a cuck. Fuck off. That's where we are. That's who we have to be. This is about our kids' futures. This is about the future of civilization itself against these fucking pedophilic vampires. Never forget that. Never forget the most important meme on the planet ever made. Picture of the earth with a big arrow. You are here paying taxes to pedophiles. Keep that in your head at all times. That's your motivation. That's your motivation. And if gold going to $10,000 an ounce is the means by which we balance the fucking books and take these people out, great. But how do you win? Well, yeah, obviously, if gold goes to $10,000 an ounce and their gold reserves are huge, they now have more dollars with which to inflate. Unless we, of course, in the process of going to $10,000 an ounce, force them to put all their gold on the table to defend their system of control. And then you drain them. And then now it's our gold, and that gold is $10,000 an ounce. And they have nothing. Because they spent it at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The higher gold goes, the more it's going to cost for them to do this. The higher silver goes, the more it's going to cost for them to do this. Because they can't continue the wealth extraction system from us to the middle managers, to the upper managers, to them, without the system they currently have. That system requires leverage. It requires it requires non-closing arbitrage. It requires all the things that Vince and I have been talking about, and everybody, and Brent and Caitlin Long and everybody, all the Bitcoiners, we've all been talking about for years. It requires that system to roll the wealth up to them. That system is turning deflationary. That system is being turned on its head. That's why tariffs scare the fuck out of them. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And they will defend that system with every dollar they have, or every ounce of gold they've stolen, or every barrel of oil they think they still control. They will do this. And the money they generate off the cash flow of all of their oil majors that they own, and all the gold miners they own, and all the fucking mob bosses that they own, and all the drug networks they own, and all of that shit. But at some point, when those things start getting knocked out from underneath them, and those cash flows are drying up, then they have to put their seed money on the table. That's when we take them out. That's when we roll them in flour and do the terrible thing that I can't bring myself to actually close that joke because there were too many women in the audience. That's when we kill them. But that's what we need to do. That's our mission. And if you don't have the stomach for it, then please don't make it harder for us. And if it wasn't happening, I would tell you so. I'm not here in any way, manner, shape, or form saying, I think, this is what I hope for. I made those arguments 7 years ago. I'm not hoping for that anymore. That's the world I want. We're getting that world. For most of Gold, Ghosts, and Guns, we weren't getting that world. We were getting the exact opposite. And yes, are there snakes in the garden in the information space and digital IDs and everything? Yes. Do we have to watch out for them? Yes. Are they tomorrow's problem? Yes. Those systems are fragile. Those systems require the kind of infrastructure that they can't maintain without an enforcement class, an enforcement arm. Power plants, data centers, they're all fighting the depreciation curve. I'm sorry, but old networks of moving drugs around is like, those aren't depreciating assets, folks. Like the depreciation curve on data centers is retarded. Like, okay, let's give them, they think they're going to run this control system. Here, how about you use rapidly depreciating assets that have a depreciation curve of 3 years as opposed to 50? How are they going to maintain that system? Like, everybody's worried about this whole fucking AI thing. It's like you're missing the point. It all runs on rapidly depreciating assets. The power plants themselves, no, they run for 100 years, but they require us to keep going. We control the power plants. We're not the battery. We're the ones with the power. Because the power plants don't run if we don't mine the uranium and run the trucks and this and that and everything else. The robots can't run all this shit. They think that's the way it's going to work. It is not. Silver's going parabolic. And it's going parabolic because we have finally reached that moment where the paper market has been revealed to be a fraud. We always knew it was a fraud, but everybody played along with the fraud because there was just enough, because everybody was making money off the fraud. Now, all of a sudden, someone's not making enough money off the fraud, or more appropriately, somebody has decided the fraud needs to end. And the two entities that have decided that this fraud needs to end are China and the United States. Because they're the two incentivized most to end the bullshit. And that's exactly what's happening. And London can't get this shit under control. London can't get this shit under control to the point where they're not doing bear raids on silver during London hours, or they're using off-peak hours to their advantage. They're trying to use off-peak hours to bomb the silver market, the futures market, in order to try and reset the market. It's not doing that anymore. They're trying to do it during New York hours to blame New York for it. You know how much more expensive it is? Maybe they've even been forced into the New York market because how else are they going to, borrow against silver? They don't have. Right? Maybe they've been forced into the. I have to think. I'm going to ping Vince on that thought, because that just literally just popped into my head, because so many people have been like, "Well, it's still happening during New York hours," and you say it's London, and that's bullshit, Tom. You're just full of shit. I'm like, well, no. That's when the markets are most liquid. That's when there's the opportunity to actually go out. That's when the banks are open to actually, that they're dealing with in order to try and, lease the silver they don't have at exorbitant rates. Like, those things aren't happening during Singapore hours. Those markets aren't deep enough to do that. And clearly there's no silver in London, so you got to go try and release the shit during the business hours when people are actually trading. And clearly the Chinese aren't like leasing the freaking gold out or the silver out. They're trapped. They have to go into the New York market. And that's why we keep, maybe, I'm going to say that's why. Maybe that's why we're seeing all these bear raids on silver during the day, which then get reversed just before, in the last hour before the close. We're seeing a lot of this happen, especially after London and Europe close at the 11 o'clock hour every morning. And the bear raids are, and again, it could easily be New York guys going, hey, look, we have an opportunity here to fleece the friggin' Muppets and then take this thing higher. And we'll give them what they want, and then we'll kill them. Or in the immortal words of Patton, this is where we hold them by the nose and kick them in the ass. That's what's happening. This thing could go really disorderly, really quick. So stay nimble. Don't get shaken out by big downdrafts. That's what they want you to do. Hold your line, hold your water. There's going to come a day, and it's going to be on the weekly chart. You've already made fabulous money. You've already made more than enough money on this run. If it goes to 60 or 65 before it rolls over, great. And you only sell at 58 because you waited for the reversal signal, which then crashes the market. And, great. You still did great because you still sold sold $8 over what your original target was, which was the all-time high. And that's the way you have to look at it. You leave $65 on the floor for the god of greed. Then pick it back up at 45 or 40 and then watch it go. Watch it run. Watch the next wave happen. Because someone is going to have to put that silver into the refiners. I have to ask the question right now, who's putting the silver into the refiners at this moment in time right now to try and feed the dearth of London? What people don't understand is, like, I think I've said this before, but I'll make sure that I'm explicit about this because I think people are confused. There's enough silver out there. Tomorrow you should be able to go to APMEX or Silver Gold Bull or whatever your favorite gold delivery, Costco or whatever, and buy silver. There's probably silver at the stores. I haven't looked, but I'm sure they have some. It may be a little expensive, but I'm sure they have some. And maybe they're, and if worse, they're 7-day delivery. Okay, fine. That's never a good sign, by the way. But there's silver out there. The problem is there's not enough 400-ounce LBMA good for delivery bars that the contracts are written against. You can't turn a 500-ounce monster box of green tubes of Silver Eagles in to satisfy the silver delivery contract on the LBMA against your silver short. Right? To the long. You can't give them that silver. You got to give them a 400-ounce bar stamped with the LBMA's approval, and that means that it has to go to a particular refiner, blah, blah, and that's the thing that's short. There are hundreds of ounces of silver out there in paper contracts that are coming due and standing for delivery against these bars that don't exist. That's the problem. Can that be alleviated? Yes. Are there enough silver refiners in the world to get this done? No. Bitcoin. Last week we had the world's most ridiculous Bitcoin bar, and then the volatility's gone. So somebody squashed the breakout, dumped a whole bunch of Bitcoin on the market. I hope some of you bought some, and now we're building another base again at 110. Okay, keep playing the game. Establish a new all-time high and a recent low, and you still couldn't get the close against it on a weekly basis. Again, if you were charting this thing on a daily basis, or if you were being a retard like Peter Schiff and watching it in real time and then tweeting about it in order to sell gold, which is pathetic. I mean, flat out fucking pathetic. Then yeah. But if you're looking at the chart from a weekly perspective, what do you see? You see a pathetic attempt at trying to break down the price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is collateral, just like gold is. Silver may start to become collateral. I mean, dudes, if we actually get, dudes and dudettes, if we actually get that moment where a central bank says, we are putting silver on the balance sheet of our central bank, that's game over. That's $150 silver. That's it. And if you don't think that that there aren't furious phone calls out there and massive threats against small central banks that need the reserves, that they're not doing that, again, you're crazy. I know that. I know that's got to be happening at this point. And is that not fucking phenomenal? I would love to be wrong about my call that silver is never going to be a monetary metal ever again. I never thought I was ever going to be wrong about that call, to be honest with you. Never thought in a million years I was going to be wrong on that call. I may be wrong on that call. Wouldn't that be fucking hilarious? The one thing I get, I get really wrong. But no, not really. Again, when you have a sea change in the way we account for value, we account for leverage, and we account for everything else. We account for reality. Yes, silver could get remonetized in some way, at least for a short period of time. Interestingly, when I was talking with Vince last week, I mentioned copper. And Vince and I talked about copper. What a shock. Yesterday, Freeport-McMoRan came out and said they're exiting the normal chain of copper pricing. We're getting out of that, which is, of course, controlled by City of London and copper futures. Freeport-McMoRan is one of the biggest copper miners in the world. Just saying. Oh, look. Same thing is happening in copper that's happening in silver. The old system of control over the price is breaking down. And copper is trying to break through, definitively break through $5 a pound on a monthly closing basis. And it's being fought egregiously, 50 and 20 cents a day now. Copper is moving. There's a heart attack happening in copper too. We're seeing spastic trading in copper. Brent Crude. We're seeing spastic trading in Brent Crude as well. Is this going to be the week when we finally say that's enough? Pick a fucking price, and can we just please start, getting rid of the volatility? Maybe, just maybe, if we take Venezuela off the board, which we already have, and we let Iran back on the board, that we're going to get we'll get some rationality in the pricing of oil. Peace in the Middle East is going to bring us rationality in the price of oil. And it's going to destroy City of London's ability to fuck with the oil markets. By writing geopolitical checks their fucking intelligence services can't cash. All with the purpose of keeping oil the most volatile core asset on the planet. All right, let's do the TIC report. I teased this out earlier. I'm going to do about 5 to 7 minutes on this, and then we'll run through the rest of it because the rest of it's pretty boring. Couple of things to talk about. Hey, let's talk about Europe. They're still buying like fucking mad. This is the last TIC report we're going to have before the European trade deal went into effect, which was signed on July 28th. So it was not going to show up in the TIC data, right? But should start showing up in the August and September TIC data, which we'll get in the October and November TIC reports. So we're going to get the October report real soon now. Well, hell, hey, it's the 15th. We'll probably get it tomorrow. We might get it tonight. I'm so late getting this one out the door that I'm a month behind. So this is what happened in July. The Bank of England pushed their official totals to $900 billion, up $41 billion in July, defending the pound. Norway, interestingly enough, was up $12 billion. And I don't know, Norway is an oil, it was a big move by Norway. And I'm putting percentages in here to give you an idea of how big the moves are. When you see Spain at $15 billion in U.S. Treasuries in a month, that represents a 23% expansion of their central bank's reserves. So the euro was being propped up by Spain buying shit tons of treasuries. Canada sold $57 billion, and this is the key to understanding it. And the Chinese also sold $27 billion, down to $730 billion total, the lowest total that we've seen in 20 years. Australia was a big buyer. The UAE was a big buyer. What are we hearing? What does this look like? Again, this is a Bank of England moment. This is all tied to the Bank of England. It's all tied to the Commonwealth. Right? So what I'm seeing, and if you look at the full TIC report with Canada, it's up 57 billion one month, it's down the next month, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. So it's clearly what Carney is doing is he's managing the exchange rate of the Canadian dollar by buying US treasuries one month and sending them overseas the next month. And again, I was thinking about this morning, like, what is he doing? And I think the best answer here is exactly what I'm about to say, which is he's buying one month, selling the next month, and then turning around and he's selling it to Europe at a subsidized price using the swap rate, using some kind of swap rate between one of the foreign central banks, the European central banks, or a melange of them, and Canada's to undercut Fed funds. So again, as I said from the beginning, when Carney was installed, that his goal was to create an offshore dollar pump into Europe in order to prop up the currency over there, and try to reset and do an end run around SOFR through his own offshore dollar system set up right on our northern border, and we're now watching it play out in real time. And he's not going to stop doing this while he destroys Canada. And he's clearly burning Canada to the ground. His goal here is to liquidate Canada while trying to stave off the implosion of the Bank of England. Why does the Bank of England need $900 billion worth of U.S. treasuries? But to keep the pound from collapsing? Why do they need the pound from collapsing? Because if the pound collapses, then the euro-pound cross collapses out of the range below the floor, and the euro starts to collapse. We have political collapse in France. We have we have MERS in Germany is in serious trouble. We've got, a political, firestorm brewing in the UK. All of this is happening at the same time, and it's all right in the TIC data. You got to break it down country by country, and you got to look at it. Brazil sold 15. Again, everybody associated with the high table at this point is buying U.S. treasuries or selling them to somebody else. Probably, I would think that Brazil and Canada were the ones selling into the Bank of England system. But net, this still rose by their net. They still had net $50 billion worth of buying. Something else I noticed. I finally did a thing. I kept forgetting, saying to myself, why do I have this highlighted here? When I was putting everything together. Well, this is the bottom. This is when Powell stopped raising by 75 basis points, right? It's when the lion's share of the raising of interest rates ended, and the extreme defense of currencies was taking place, and the Chinese were selling. For the most part, the Chinese and the Japanese were actually selling the most U.S. treasuries. So this becomes your bottom, right? Well, net, since the interest rates, crossed 4.5%, and now we're at 4.25% today. Note that just over time, the whole region has bought $200 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. Now, China has sold off a bunch, but net, Hong Kong has more, Singapore has more, Australia has more. Taiwan is up to $300 billion. South Korea is up. Everybody else has been buying, and the Japanese have also been buying. So the death of the U.S. Treasury market has been greatly exaggerated. I need you to understand that we're at $9.1 trillion. And this is, again, I pisses me off when I hear people like say dumb shit in order to make themselves sound smart. And this is, I remember Luke Roman saying this like last year. Well, that's just the this because it's going up because the value of those treasuries has gone up. The street value of them has gone up because there's been a rally in U.S. rates. I'm like, no, this is the number. This is the face value of these fucking bonds. Like, don't lie. Like that. Don't lie. Like, don't lie to save to save a bad position. If your position's bad, admit it and go, oh, well, yeah, but that doesn't comport with, your thesis. So therefore it must be wrong. That's nice. It's nonsense. There is not net selling by foreign central banks of U.S. treasuries. There is. Now, ask yourself, absent the European Union and their offshore system, is there net selling? If they weren't buying, it would be what? It would be flat. The rest of the world has bought 300 since September 21. And Asia Pacific, the Chinese, have sold 296. It's flat. It's flat. Because, like it or not, the world still needs dollars and they still want treasuries at good yields and good value. And no matter how much my friend Dave Collum wants to complain about bond valuations, this is where we are, folks. This is the way the market is pricing these things. I'm not saying that, by historical metrics, any of these central banks are not unbelievably over leveraged but at this point, they don't seem to think that they need to get more than 4% on their 10-year bonds. So why do you think that you should get 8? Dave? Like, would I put money in a 10-year U.S. Treasury at 4%? No. Why? Because I can get a T-bill that also pays me 4% because we got an inverted yield curve. But other people need term structure. I'm not in the market for 10-year U.S. Treasuries. If the Fed funds rate was 2% and we were growing at 2%, growing at 3% a year or 2% a year real, in real terms, yeah, I'd be a buyer of treasuries at 4%. Fuck you, Dave. I would. Like, sorry, I would. I would buy 10-year treasury notes at that point, at that price. Because they should be trading to 3.5. And if they went to 4.25, I'd definitely be a buyer, which is exactly what the central banks are doing. So this is fascinating. The European Union has built a massive nest egg, a war chest of U.S. treasuries to sell into the collapse of the euro. To defend the euro when it starts to fall. So they can sell treasuries to buy dollars, to then sell dollars to buy their own currencies, to buy the euro. And if we're watching within the TIC report, central banks or commercial banks just literally washing through Canada and other places net treasury sales, and that's getting counted. I'm getting some pushback from a guy on Twitter this morning. These are astute questions. He's being honest. He's not being a troll about the flows into the euro. You can't look at not look at this as part of the when you're looking at cross-border currency flows, trade settlement. Well, if all they're doing is trading fucking treasuries back and forth, converting dollars into euros and calling that trade, great. Okay. You want to call that trade? Call it trade. I don't care. But we're not producing these anymore. So now that we've stopped issuing as many treasuries because our budget is getting balanced, now we're watching yields come down as demand stays high for U.S. treasuries. and or stays the same, but the supply is drying up. That's going to force the prices down. It's going to force prices up and bond yields down. So for futures market is flat since so far this week. U.S. dollar index is holding around 99. The euro's bounced back to 116. The yen hasn't moved. The pound is the one currency here that is moving sharply lower relative to where it was and is continuing to fall is the British pound. U.S. German 10-year is at it's actually 1.44%. Forgot to update again. As always, we're getting a little bit of de-stressing in this market in the US UK 10-year yield market, but again, the amount of buying has been off the fucking charts. Japanese government bonds, that was, the world was breaking down, and Japan was, a basket case last Monday. Now by next Wednesday, we're down 4 basis points over where we were then. Copper keeps going back and forth, moving 10, 15 cents a day, 480, 510, 503, 485. It's all over the fucking place. Every time I look at copper, I can never predict where it's going to be relative to the rest of the market. That means it's decoupled from everything else. Like I usually take a snapshot of the markets in my head and then check copper last, because I don't have copper in my normal watch list. I have to actually click through to find it. And I usually don't even look for it until I'm ready to do the market report. I don't look at it on a day-to-day basis. And then every time I'm like, I do the whole snapshot of the thing, and then it's like the last data point I pull for the entire market report is copper and gasoline, because I have to actually go in and grep those. Don't ask me whether or not my watch lists. They should be, but they're not. I'm always surprised by the copper price. Always. Because it doesn't make any goddamn sense. So it's clearly decoupled from everything else that's happening in a macro sense. To put a little bit more, color on the whole argument about Italy. Oh, look at where the German-Italian 10-year spread is, given all the turmoil. Market is clearly saying Italy is preferential to Germany. And it didn't even, nothing, there was no way to stop the Middle East peace process. They created some turmoil in the U.S.-German spread, and nothing showed up in the Italian spread. That's an interesting moment. And it's just now moving lower. And gasoline's $1.84 a gallon. We'll get the CPI next week, and we'll see what it looks like. Last thing to talk about is the Dow. So we got the big washout in the Dow last week. Oh, have we seen this before? I'm sorry. So here we are. Boom. Here we are. Boom. Here we are. Boom. When are you going to realize that they do these massive drawdowns on our equity markets in order to try and induce panic, usually on a Friday, and then grab that money to then try and deploy it somewhere else? Like, my big worry with the U.S. equity markets where they are now is that when Davos decides to really defend itself, the first thing it's going to do is pull most of its money out of the U.S. equity markets and use the concentration of capital in the Mag 7 as a weapon against this. Okay, this is very important. I see that as nothing but, I see nothing but threats there. So watch that carefully. That being said, this is a great bounce in the Dow, setting up nicely for a potential 1-bar reversal this week, or definitely a 2-bar reversal next week if these levels hold. There's no reason that they shouldn't. Trump is winning on every front. Peace in the Middle East. Oil prices are down. Inflation should moderate. GDP is hot. Blah 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 blah. All this. It's like there's no reason for it. And Trump got the Chinese to back down on, trade deal fuckery. I wonder if that was all kayfabe, to be honest with you. So for October so far, the Dow is only up, a little bit. Everything else is outpacing it. Q3 still here until October. This will be Q3. Once we move into November, this will become Q4, and this will become November. And for the year, it's also very interesting that the Dow is actually so far this week is outperforming a lot of other indices, and it's starting to play catch up again. So with that said, we'll see how things play out. I don't expect the Dow to outperform any of the other major indices for the rest of the year. It's too big from a market cap perspective to outperform these other indexes unless there is real, honest to God, political turmoil that collapses governments. So here we are, middle of October. France is boiling over. We're watching the Germans try to stop a populist uprising against them. Starmer's hanging on by the skin of his teeth. Everybody's hanging on by the skin of their teeth in Europe. It could be very interesting. And a lot of these relationships that we've seen all year long can vanish in a day. And if they do, I'll be there for you, as always, because not only do I do this for a living, folks, you know I love it. This shit's fun. So, with that said, you guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.